Hola, Gemino. Welcome back, Jimmy.
Thanks.
Dear friend Jim has just arrived only less than a couple of days ago from a poetry festival, a rather prestigious one held in Granada, Nicaragua. And as usual, Dr. Gemino Abad was invited to participate in this international poetry festival, which also comes quite on the heels of another international distinction he received, the Ferronia Prize in Italy about 2-3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yeah.
How was your, first things first, how was it at Nicaragua?
It is like the poetry festival in Medellin. Large crowds, and when you read or recite your poem, the crowd listens. They fall silent.
Yes.
They're very appreciative.
Medellin is in Colombia, which Jim also attended a couple of years back, if I'm not mistaken. So that makes 2 Latin American poetry festivals already, giving us an inkling, or more than an inkling, of the status of our interviewee, Dr. Abad, his status not only in terms of Philippine literature, but world literature. This festival, this last one in Granada, Nicaragua, I'm sure you were in the company of some stalwarts of literature, of world literature.
Oh yes, I remember particularly the poet from Chile, Raúl Talvet.
Okay,
yeah,
Talvet.
and he is considered the most prominent poet there in Chile. And of course, I met for the first time. I met the editor of the Prairie Schooner,
yes,
Kwame Dawes.
The literary journal, the long-running literary journal in the United States, which, if I remember correctly, Jim, asked you to guest edit
That's right.
a future issue.
Yes.
Featuring Philippine poetry.
In English.
Right.
Yes. This is going to be an online special feature of the Prairie Schooner. And they want me to co-edit it with Kwame. It's limited to about 15 to 20 points on the theme of trees.
Yes,
they selected the theme themselves, trees.
Trees.
So
So when is that due out?
September.
In 2013.
Sometime September this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
I recall now, I understand that there was another major literary personage in that recent festival in Granada. In fact, I believe this year's festival was held in honor of him.
Oh, definitely. This festival is in honor of the most prominent poet in Nicaragua. That's Ernesto Cardenal.
Cardenal, yes.
And very colorful life story.
Yes. A former priest.
Yes.
Who got castigated, probably even almost excommunicated, I think, by the Pope or by the Vatican at his time. Because I think he was a pioneer in liberation theology.
That's right. He joined the Sandinista movement against the dictator Somoza. They overthrew him. Ernesto Cardenal. He also recited his poem from memory.
I see.
The
way you do. The way you do very often.
From memory. And it was a very long poem. In Spanish, of course.
And you also recently wrote a poem in his honor, right? Or a poem tribute to him.
Yes, and I read that. I read that poem. The title of that poem is "The Pope Expels Certain Saints," and I gave him the manuscript as well as the book.
He must have been very pleased. He must have been very happy to receive that.
Well, we had a picture together.
But they'll still take time for them to translate this, no?
That's right.
Speaking of translation, Jim, again, as another manifestation of your status in world literature, no? Around how many languages already have your poetry, your fiction, your criticism, your essays been translated to?
Well, I can only mention Italian.
Yes.
Yeah. Gemino Abad is the translator there, with some assistant there. They translated the entire, well, almost the entire book in ordinary time. The poems there, yeah, in ordinary. But they're going to publish that as a book, and the title is "Where No Words Break." In Italian, of course. Yeah. So that's one, and then there is another translator, Beatriz Tardillo. Alvarez Tardillo. She's a Spanish scholar. She's putting out an anthology of Philippine poetry in English, bilingual, in Spain. And I'm not the only poet in that anthology. There will be other Filipino poets there, yeah, in Spanish. Yeah.
I'm sure you've also had some poems translated into Chinese or Japanese.
Well, when this was a long time ago, with F. Sionel Jose, we went to Taiwan. He was the leader of the group, F. Sionel Jose, and we also read our poems there. And the following day, the poems were translated into Chinese.
But getting back to home territory, one of the latest distinctions earned by Jimmy is the recent publication of a very important part of an anthology series. This one is Horde of Thunder, which is an anthology of the finest fiction in English, short fiction in English, written by Filipinos of a certain period that leads to, well, contemporary times. This is the third in the series, right, Jim?
That is the last sequel anthology of a 6-volume anthology of our short stories in English. I start from 1956, the first 2 volumes, 1956 to 1971, and then the next 2 volumes, Underground Spirit, 1972 to 1987. Yeah. And then this last one, Horde of Thunder, 1988. No, 1990. 1990. So
to the present.
yeah.
To the present.
So that the previous one ends with 1989. Yeah.
And this may also be said to be fitting follow-ups to another important trilogy that you had initiated and co-edited the first of the first 2 volumes with Dr. Edna Malapas.
That's poetry.
That's
our poetry in English.
This is Man of Earth.
And from 1900 to 2000. Yeah, it's a 3-volume thing. That's Man of Earth, and then A Native Clearing, and then A Habit of Shores.
Habit of Shores. So 3 for poetry and
6 for
the short story, because short stories are, of course, longer in terms of
1956 to 2008.
These alone can serve as the backbone, of any claim on your part or on your adherents' part for your proper position in the pantheon of Philippine literature, whether in English or Filipino. Tell me, Jim, with the publication of Horde of Thunder, that makes it how many books exactly that you have authored?
I was asked by the English department to give them a list of all my works, including works co-edited
with
other
that's a full biblio.
Other writers. So I listed 30.
30, including the ones edited.
Including the ones co-edited with other authors. But I did not count other books that not quite literature. No? In other words, there was one project, Supreme Court decisions as literature.
Yes, yes.
You know,
Very
that
good.
thing. Yeah, I didn't include that. I mean,
That's also literature.
yeah,
That's also literature.
as literature. Yeah, so I excluded some works from that list. Yeah.
What was the very first book credited to you as author?
As author, it's Fugitive Emphasis.
Which was
It's a book of poems.
what year would that be?
That's 1976, I think.
1976.
Yeah.
Okay.
1976. Yeah.
So it's safe to say that you have been authoring for the last 37 years, or almost 4 decades.
That's it. Up to
Was
the
that the
press,
UP Press book, Fugitive?
Yeah, that was a special issue of the Diliman Review.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
The Diliman Review used to do that.
Yes.
For authors. Special issue, it's all yours. So you have a book.
1976.
1976.
That would still be around martial law, no?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
1976. At around that time, Jim, you were already a professor at that time, right?
I think I just came back from Chicago. I came back from Chicago in 1970. So I might have been assistant professor.
Okay.
Yeah.
At around that time, when you were writing what became the contents
Fugitive Emphasis.
of Fugitive Emphasis, who would you say would have been the major influences on your work at that time?
It would be Wallace Stevens. Yeah. He would be the major one. Plus, I suppose, Gerard Manley Hopkins. Yeah.
Were these two foreign, you might say, influences? Did they impact on you only when or only because you spent some time in Chicago for your graduate studies? No. Or did they come even earlier, you know?
Much earlier, especially Gerard Manley Hopkins. I studied for 2 years in Los Baños after high school. Yeah, that was the 1954 to 1956. I was in Los Baños. It was Gerard Manley Hopkins that I was reading there. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
and,
so that early you were wind hovering.
That's right.
Los Baños.
And it was he who as it were, encouraged me to enter the Jesuit order. I thought I was going to be a poet by becoming a Jesuit.
And was it in turn, was it Wallace Stevens's turn to draw you out of the order after?
It was already in, when I left the Jesuit order, after 3 years in the Jesuit order, I entered UP Diliman as an English major. Okay. That was the time I came upon Wallace Stevens.
I see. Okay. Apart from international or foreign authors or major stars as poets, no? What about Filipino influence?
I'm glad you asked that question. From the beginning, when the family transferred to the UP Diliman campus, my father organized the Spanish department. We stayed on campus. I was in high school, UP High School. Our neighbor was NVM Gonzalez. Yeah, and I would go to NVM and show him my short stories. Yeah, and I would walk all the way to Area 14 to show Franz my poems. Franz Arceliana, those two. Yeah, and then there was Alejandrino Hufana, who was very encouraging. Yeah.
So all three happen to be professors in the University of the Philippines.
Yes, and then there was Dimitilio.
Yes,
Ricardo Dimitilio. So in other words, you are in an environment surrounded by renowned writers. Any comment they make,
whose place obviously you've already taken, or long ago actually. You've taken over that place, that pantheon again of very formidable, influential poets and writers based in UP Diliman. There was one fellow, however, who came to visit, and I understand you took a class under him, Jose Garcia Villa.
Yes, that was the only that was the time FEU gave him an honorary degree, and then he was invited to teach for 1 semester in the UP. So we were classmates. Erwin Castillo, was the other one, Sanchez.
Wilfredo
Not Wilfredo. No, Erwin Castillo, Ernesto Manalo. He would go there. Yeah.
Terra?
Jun Terra.
Yeah.
Yes, Jun Terra. Afable, Fernando Afable. Yeah.
Not Quadra, Jolico.
Jolico would drop by.
Jolico
Quadra, but he was not formally enrolled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Petronilo Daroy?
No.
Was he part of it?
No, he wasn't part of it. Yeah, but he was around.
So,
yeah.
did you learn anything from Jose?
Oh yeah, what I remember from Jose Garcia Villa is, first, he never liked any one of our poems. No, he never liked anyone, no, any poem. But he would always say, clean up your lines, clean up your lines. I remember that very distinctly, yeah. And then, to our surprise, when he came out with the Dovig Lion book of Philippine poetry in English, our poems were there. So in other words, he didn't want to, well, I suppose he wanted us to strive harder. I suppose that was his intention. Yeah.
But were there any specific lessons he imparted, apart from a general admonition to clean up lines? Do you remember any particular facet of poetry writing where he actually helped you along, the class or yourself, where you learned a lot? Let's say line cutting or rhyming or metrics or imagery.
I can't say. Yeah, I can't say. Yeah, it was very informally conducted. In fact, most of the time we were not in the classroom. We would go to Little Quiapo, where the UP Chapel is now, and over halo-halo, we just chat about poetry. Yeah, but nothing very formal. Yeah.
And then the rest, of course, well, there was Franz, who eventually became a very dear friend of yours. No?
Yes,
and
Franz.
Practically a peer.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And N.V.M. Gonzalez in terms of fiction. As you said, Alex Sufana was a poet. All that experience in the Diliman days of the 60s, the 70s, can you say that they congealed at some point and formed some fountainhead of sorts in terms of your poetic principles, which might have evolved further, no, to this point? But given those first 2 decades of being a young professor and a practicing poet, what would have been your ars poetica by, say, the 80s?
It's hard to say. All I can say is it would be formalist.
Formalist.
Because that was the time of the new critics. So I went that way too. But then the chair of the department at the time was Dionisia Rola, who later on became Chancellor of UB Visayas. She was the one who sent me to the University of Chicago under a Rockefeller grant. It was she who introduced me to the so-called Chicago School of Criticism, New Aristotelian. So that shaped me. Before I went to the University of Chicago, I knew already who my advisor was going to be, Elder Olson, because he's one of the critics in the New Aristotelian school.
Would you say then that your experience in Chicago, in U.S. academic life, impacted more on your current fascination with, or current adequacy with regards literary criticism, more than with actual, creative writing or poetry? or would it have been just about equal? The influence that you gained while you were in Chicago.
In Chicago, it would impact more on the theorizing and things like that about poetry. It would impact more there. Because later on, new things came around with people like people like Derrida and Foucault and people like that. I got fascinated with them too. And I think my book, The Space Between, is a kind of tribute to that other way of thinking about literature. But I have given that up.
Which is, would you agree with me? It's kind of a super extension of what people, how people regard, say, okay, poetry. Sometimes all these French
the
philosophizing, or parang they tend to not really overread, but overextend the interpretation of a poem or what the poem can come to be. It's not just totally out of the box. It's like stretching it to their own parang whims and caprices, or the caprices of their mental faculties. Parang pinaglalaroan lang, and they use it as a plaything to stretch a point, or something like that.
I think, I have that impression myself. It's the word super attenuated. I wonder if that's the word for it. It's too over subtle.
More than nitpicky. Or sometimes using a work just to support a theory that they had already arrived at.
I think so.
Which is not really an honest way of appraising a particular work to arrive at something that you don't know yet. That's my own personal suspicion. That they already have a theory in mind, and then they get suitable works to fit into that theory.
Deconstruction is like that.
Deconstruction. Well, I'm glad that and your own students know for a fact that you lend them your own expertise, in poetry, in a more fundamental way.
I should think so. For me, the bottom line is language.
I'm
That's
glad
the bottom
you said
line.
that.
How you cultivate that language. If I may quote, I just read it. Ezra Pound. He says, a writer's job is to keep the language efficient. That's the one.
Efficient.
Keep the language efficient.
What do you say to your class the first day you meet them? A poetry class.
I suppose I go directly to that main thing, that language is the bottom line. That's the bottom line, language. The very word text. See, I'm very fond of etymology. The very word text is from Latin, texere, textus, which means to weave. So a text is word weave. So start weaving. When you're writing, you're weaving words. The words, you only have the words. You have no other means but the words. So you have to exploit the evocative power of words. That's poetry.
It's particularly true of poetry.
And then I also tell them, short stories, novels, there's poetry there too. Although the form, you call it prose, but there's also poetry there. You cannot get away from it.
But how would you make a distinction, however, in terms of the what you call the efficiency of language, or making language efficient to serve the purpose of poetry as against to serve the purpose of fiction? How do you distinguish that?
Well, poetry is a distillation of a moment that has been lived or imagined. Yeah, it's a distillation.
More compressed.
Yeah, and what is important there is the sensation of the living of that moment. Yeah, that's the important thing, and you try and get that with the rhythm, as well as the words that you have chosen.
As against in fiction, what would be more important?
In fiction, what is important is the progression of the action.
Narrative technique.
Yes. There has to
structure.
Have structure.
Structure.
That action progresses, and as the reader reads it, he makes judgments of character, of the action itself as he goes along reading it.
Character, relationships.
There are interactions between characters. So it's a wider field.
And then you have this different religious field of criticism, which is not the same as poetry, of course, and not the same as fiction, but which particular subgenre in literature you also have been quite famous for. No? So, what can you say about criticism that makes it stand out compared to the other genres like poetry and short fiction and long fiction?
I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, when you have a poem or you have a short story, that already is an interpretation of what has been imagined. Therefore, interpretation is redundant. It is already an interpretation, the poem or the short story.
The creative work.
Now, criticism is there to help the reader, any reader, to appreciate what has been accomplished.
I
think that's the critic's
You serve as
job.
a guide, you serve as a bridge
to help
for understanding.
to help the reader appreciate what has been achieved. The critic cannot help also interpret what already is an interpretation.
Of course.
And it can vary.
That's when it comes to specific works, specific works. And then there is, of course, criticism that takes the entire forest, and not the trees alone, not each individual tree, but the existence of that particular work in conjunction with, or in consensus with, in synergy with the rest of the landscape. What has been done about, the same thing, ganyan, or like, it is what you deal with when you present these anthologies, di ba?
Oh, yes.
You're showing a picture of a gamut of Filipino works, whether it's poetry or fiction. You are actually showing off an entire generation's produce, And there is that criticism where you compare works, right? And you present the whole as compared again to, say, regional literature or international literature. So madami, many forks in the road, many branches. Let me ask, if you don't mind, though, yung parang, okay, you're known as a man of many literary hats, no? You shift from one genre to another. There seems to be one genre that has been awaiting your entry into the door, which is long fiction.
That is a dream. That's a dream. A long time ago, See, the greatest novel for me is The Brothers Karamazov.
Okay.
Okay. So I was. This is just a dream. Why not a novel on the brothers Luna?
Okay.
Now, because it would be very interesting. You have a painter, you have a general, and I think the third brother is a doctor. No, I have to check that out. No, but it's just a dream. Yeah. The other dream, of course, is it can be the easier one. The easier one would be a fictionalized biography.
Yeah.
That would be the easiest.
Romana Clef.
That would be the easiest.
Loosely based on their lives.
To the present, that's a dream.
What about creative nonfiction, what we call creative nonfiction?
Oh yeah, I love doing that.
Yes.
I love doing that.
You have been anthologized with certain light essays, personal essays.
Yes, I do some of that. Yeah, but I think the main thing with me is poetry. Yeah. I think that's the main thing.
Again, what about possible memoir?
I'm not attracted to it.
To the subject? Okay.
The memoir, or travel. Travel
writing.
writing.
Can't you introduce
That's a different
a form of memoir where it's parang written like a critic, where you introduce or you help the reader appreciate what has happened with you, your experiences.
In fact, see, my library is a mess, and I'm fixing it. And then I found some manuscripts that I wrote while I was a student there at the University of Chicago. I was starting to write my own biography, autobiography, as poetry. In other words, in fact, right now I have this creative writing project from UP, and my creative writing project is new poems and past, because I want to look at some of my drafts, and see if they can be resuscitated. And then I found this manuscript where I began to write my biography as
narrative verse.
As narrative verse. In fact, if I succeed, there will be one in this next book, in my beginning, and I imagine myself as a baby. In Santa Ana, Manila, and so forth, etc. I don't know if it will work out.
But will that be in the form of a philosophical meditation as well?
Sort of. Sort of. In other words, I want to examine.
Examine yourself from another point of view.
Now
so
that
it
I'm
won't
old,
be eternal, no?
Now that I'm old, but try and recover your memory of it. What is your feeling about girls when you were very young? No. And I have something about girls when I was 10 years old and so forth. Things like that. You try to recover a feeling. What was it with you and girls during that time?
Jim, can you tell me what you're currently working on? I know that writers usually have several projects on the plate. And you must have also more than one.
Well, I am you might say a one-track person. So I can only have one project at any single period of time. So my current writing project is, I want a book of new poems, but to play it safe, since I'm not sure it can be all new, I thought that I might also look at drafts of poems that I did not succeed with in writing, and include some of those drafts if they become poems.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as Professor Emeritus in UP, I'm very lucky that anytime I have a writing project, I can have a writing grant.
Okay.
Yeah. So the resource is there. Yeah. So I submitted that as my next writing project.
Great.
Yeah. For a title, I use a passage from a poem by Bienvenido Santos. He is one poet that I also admire. Carlos Angeles is another one, but this poem is called Pagan. And there's a phrase there which, well, I just took the phrase, past mountain dreaming. Now, I thought, yeah, that's a good title, Past Mountain Dreaming, New Poems and Past. Yeah, so that's my new writing project.
How many poems already?
Actually, several already. I counted about 50 poems. Yeah. Even before I submitted my writing project, I already have those poems.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're not. Some are revised poems from earlier collections. No, but for so long as they have not yet appeared in Ordinary Time, which was a selection, I could include them if I still like them and revise a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I already have about 50 points, but some of the new points I still don't like. So maybe the ones that I really like will be about 30. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So more. I have more to go.
You're hoping for a total of what? 70, 80, or 100?
Well, maybe I'll be happy with 60, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. 60. Some are long.
Any other than that, any plan or vision or ambition to
oh yes,
write strict literary criticism in terms of poetry? Ganyan, yung parang your own precepts about what poetry should be. And what I mean is something different from what you've been doing in a scholarly manner, which is presenting your own selection of poems of a generation or two, or the fiction of certain generations of Filipino writers, but parang in general, and yet getting into specifics as far as the attributes of good poetry would be.
Yeah.
I think that would be much in demand among your former students as well as future students, or even your peers and colleagues and people who came after you, to find out from the eminent Dr. Gemino Abad what poetry should be and how to arrive at that particular quality of poetry.
No, I've not been thinking along that line for a project because I already have an introduction to the practice of poetry, that book, Getting Real.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I have, the last one was Imagination's Way, published by the UST.
Okay.
My thinking is I might have said enough already about the writing of the writing. What I want to do is to update A Habit of Yours. That may come next. But also, I have that book, Our Scene So Fair. That is a collection of essays on the poetry in Man of Earth.
Okay.
Yeah. Therefore, I should follow up with another collection of essays, perhaps, on the contents of A Native Clearing. Yeah. And after that, the contents of A Habit of Yours. In other words, there's plenty of things to do.
Plenty of recycling.
Yeah, plenty. Yeah. But one at a time. one track. I'm one track. Yeah.
Hasn't playwriting ever interested you?
No, no, it hasn't. Yeah. No, I don't think I can handle a play. Yeah, no, I don't think I can handle a play or what's a script for a film or things like that.
Teleplay or a film script.
I know my limits. And I don't think I can handle a novel, really. No,
no, you just said that you had an idea.
Yeah, it will be a poem just the same,
okay,
but it's it will be a poem, a very long poem.
Given your experience and expertise in the last at least 5 decades, of being a practicing poet, generally, what can you say about how the art itself of poetry has been evolving? It was certainly not the way it was being written, say, in the 1950s or
That's
the
right.
60s, or as you have pointed out.
That's right.
Our Scene So Fair of the 1920s are very different, very lyrical, rhythmic. It still employed the old tropes and the rigors of cadence and rhyme, ganyan. It has since become free verse. But now, when you look at the works of the young people around us, especially, specifically Filipino poets, in both English and Filipino, what do you see that you did not see before, but you think are healthy for the continuing evolution of the art form?
I think the first the language. No? The most difficult job for the poet in terms of the language is to keep it simple, colloquial, direct, and yet yung malaman, it has substance. Now this is what I find. Some may not agree with me, but this is what I find lacking in the poetry that not all, but quite a number of the poems that I read that are published. The thought content.
Okay.
It's the thought. Maybe it's my temperament. Sort of. I want it a bit on, maybe on the philosophical side.
Okay.
Yeah. So
more cerebral poetry, ruminative,
something
as against
like that.
the emotional poetry.
Yes.
I agree with you that much of poetry has always been, let's say 80 to 90% is about emotion.
It's just effusions.
Effusions of relationships.
I want lucubrations. Yeah. So that's what I would urge the young writers to try. But however, that requires. I think it requires a lot of reading. Yeah. Reading substantial works, not just literature itself, but what are your other interests? Maybe philosophy, maybe history, maybe anthropology.
Of course, a lot of maturation also, no?
Yeah, I think so.
And then the living experience.
Yes.
Because of course, if you have a upcoming 19-year-old poet or a poet in his early 20s. Siyempre, it's understandable. It becomes effusions. He deals with his relationships that are intimate, or relationships with the world, or with the environment, but not quite sufficient for him yet to hover around the environment and comment on it, no?
More reflection on. See, parang I use the Tagalog words now. There are 3 things about the poem or the short story. There's paksa or topic, and then there is saysay. Now that's substance or significance, and then finally there is diwa, na the spirit, na yeah. So yung topic, it can be anything, na it can be love or whatever, na but the saysay, di ba, when you go out, when you criticize, ito walang saysay. Walang saysay, na or ito malaman, na at yung diwa for me is the most important, because that is the outlook, the stance or attitude toward reality, and that manifests itself not in single works but a body of works, yung the spirit of the work, napag-important. If you have the topic, especially saysay and diwa, then you have what I call, actually Aristotelian, what I call, ayan, may dating. May dating. Na it arrives. Mayroong impact. Mayroong effect.
Because of particular insights to begin with.
Yun. Actually, yung insight, yun ang saysay. Saysay requires a lot of thought about your subject matter, about your paksa, about your topic. Yan. So, yun ang dapat i-pursue ng mga young writers. Ano ang saysay nito?
If I may backtrack a bit, we'll get back to young writers, specific young writers. We should end the interview with an outlook towards the future and the next generations of Filipino poets and writers. But if we can backtrack a little, not necessarily your own, we start with your own peers at the time, when you were becoming a poet. Can you tell us a little bit about the company you kept and the influences that you might have had on one another?
Yeah. I am basically a loner. No? Therefore, I have very few, yung talagang close. No? The closest for me was the black people. Yeah. Yun ang talagang, see, to be a writer, you need a barkada. You're close to each other, and therefore you're able to exchange little notes on the writing of poetry and so forth. But not just poetry, everything. You enjoy each other's company. So actually that will include you, Crip, and then there's Ricky de Ungria, and there's Cirillo Bautista, and there's Marne Quilates, and there's Eric Gamalinda, and there's also Felix Fojas.
Freddy Salanga originally, of course.
I miss that guy. I miss that guy, Alfredo Navarro Salanga. I miss him. Yeah. And then, but also the older poets. I connected with Carlos Angeles and Tita Lacambra Ayala. Nick Joaquin. In fact, I have a cherished picture with Nick Joaquin. Nick Joaquin he loves writers, and it's easy to converse with him, etc.
Edith Tiempo.
Easy. Oh, yeah. Why did I forget Mom Edith?
I think you were reserving her for the last.
Oh, yes. Mom Edith. And more Mom Edith than Edelberto. Kasi Edelberto, fictionist. Si Mom Edith, yun talaga poetry.
And then another one we have lamented the loss of course, Ofi
Di Malanta, Ofi Di Malanta, Margie Vasco for the, we had women also. Margie Vasco, Susan Lara, although she's a fictionist, Rowena,
Jing Hidalgo,
another fiction writer. She's close, So many, including some in the Filipino, writing Filipino, like June Cruz Reyes, si Roel Aguila, si Rio Alma, si Bienvenido Lumbera. In fact, Bienvenido Lumbera was a great help in my, his writings were a great help in my introduction to Horde of Thunder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Even if I disagree with him here and there, he was a great help when I was writing that introduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now, with the new generation coming to the fore, and you are familiar with their works, both in... let's start with fiction. Okay. Just name the few or several that you can, recall whose works have impressed you. I'm speaking now of basically kids from the 20s to say the 40s. A generation or two removed from ours.
Well, let's see now. There is, I don't know, there's Sarge La Cuesta. Yeah. And there is Sitoy, Lacandini Sitoy. Yeah. And there is actually, baka he's old na.
Charles Onong, he's old na.
Oo nga eh. Yeah, Charles Onong, Boots Dalisay.
They're old.
I'm much older kasi eh. So they're young to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Madami sila. Yeah.
Yung mga batang-bata, yung the ones that you included among the last in your latest anthology nga.
She Mix Villanueva, but she's not very young. No, she's great. Mix Villanueva. I just read the stories of Nikki Alfar kasi she wanted a blurb. No? So, magaling.
Her husband Dean, of course.
Yeah, of course, Dean Alfar.
Not just speculative fiction, but...
may makatanda na ng konti. They're not very young. Yeah. Sino pa ba?
Sa poetry naman, baka mas familiar ka yan because not only do you read their works, but you also often associate with these young people in terms of the cycle of poetry readings that you are, heaven knows, you're a regular feature of, no? You're a magnet regular, no? Sayang, nawala na yung magnet. But magnet, Ateneo, USD, the readings in campuses, no?
Yeah, marami sila. Si Vince Serrano, that's one. There's Paulo Manalo here. There's Mikael Lara.
No, Mikael Lara ko.
Yeah, and then there's, of course, there's Chingbi. And then there's, sino pa ba? Waps.
Si Waps and Diego.
Si Waps.
Antonio.
Well, there's Angelo Suarez. I don't know what he's doing now.
Philosophy. Conceptual art.
Suarez.
Joel, of course.
Joel Toledo. Why did I forget him?
Yeah, we forget him because
he's in Singapore.
He used to instigate and organize the magnet readings. You don't consider him as part of the readers.
Si Cavan. Si Wazak Cavan.
In terms of, we're getting to the close of our conversation, no? Another hat that you wear is, of course, while you are Professor Emeritus in UP, you also actually handle classes in the Ateneo, the Manila University. What courses are you involved in currently?
Right now, Philippine literature in English in Ateneo, and in UP is a poetry workshop at the graduate level.
Because I recall that in recent years in Ateneo, you were handling Greek and
Roman lit. Classical literature. Yeah, and also world lit. Another semester yun. Can you imagine Homer to Shakespeare? How do you teach a course like that? Pa excerpt. difficult. Yeah.
Finally, okay. The usual words of advice or inspiration to the young writer.
Well, what I tell them is just do it. Just do it. Yeah. There are no rules. No, there are no rules. Do it, and then let's look at it and see how it can work out well. Yeah. See, because the rules can be crippling. So let go. No. You eventually, if you persevere, eventually you will find your own way through language. You will find your way through language, but you've got to be patient with yourself, yeah. And you've got to work hard, and you've got to read the other poets, yeah, and also read other stuff. Things that interest you. Maybe you're interested in astrology or history or whatever. No, don't limit yourself to literature. Yeah, some of them are nasa physics. No, oh, why not?
Why not?
It can. Physics is the science of matter. No, or what is your imagination of matter? Yeah, so.
And sometimes, as you like to quote, as you like to quote of late, no, what is imagined is more real.
What is most real is what is most imagined.
The other way around. Okay.
What is most real is what is most imagined. It's a mantra.
Goes around.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. Well, any final words? You might have some
I must.
additional.
There's another mantra that motivated all these anthologies, no? And it is this, something like, a country is only as strong as her people's memory. Yeah. Our literature is our people's memory. Yeah. So that's I also insist on that with my students. I repeat myself with my students with that mantra. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Creed.
The man himself, the man of La Mantra.
That's a good one.
Mantra of Earth. Gemino Abad. Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Jeepney. Consider honestly this piece of storm in our city's entrails. Incarnation of scrap, what genius of salvage, what cunning, what art. Its crib now molds our space, its lusty gewgaws our sight. In rut and in flood, claptrap sex of traffic, jukebox of hubbub, I mark your pride of zigzag, heeds no one's limbs nor light. I sense our truth laughing in our guts. I need no words to fix its text. This humdrum phoenix in our street is no enigma. It is a daily lesson of history sweating in a tight corner. Its breakdowns and survivals compose our book of Revelation. It may be the presumptive engine of our last mythology. Look, our macho incarnate, sweat towels slung round his neck. He collects us where the weathers of our feet strand us. He travels with his household gods, with a virgin of sudden mercy. Our collective memory, he forgets no one's fare, nor anyone's destiny. See how our countrymen cling to this trapeze against all hazards. All our lives we shall be acrobats and patiently survive. Our bodies feed on proximity. Our minds rev up on gossip. We flock in small spaces and twitter, a country of patience. Here is our heartland still. When it dreams of people, it returns empty to itself, having no power of abstraction, abandoned to itself, and in no one's care. Jeepneys caroom through it, a long country of patience. Nights I lie awake, I hear a far-off tectonic rumble. Is it a figment of desolation from that reliquary of havoc, or out of its dusty hardihood, that obduracy of mere survival, a slow horde of thunder from underground spirit of endurance?